We had been hiking this trail all day long, and it was gorgeous out there. We were pretty far out in the woods. Took us a while to drive out there, and it was just deep wilderness. But there was a good portion in the beginning of the hike that had a nice, easy trail. So we were making our way back to the truck on the trail, and all of a sudden I start to hear whistling. And the whistles didn't sound like any of the birds that we'd been hearing all day long. And my first thought was that it was a couple hikers way off the trail. But this was pretty dense forest, and I don't think that people would just be walking around out there. It was pretty thick and jagged and rough. But I was just playfully whistling back. I was like, just must be some people, like I'll whistle back. But I realized that the whistles were coming from pretty far apart from each other, and they seemed like they were kind of going further away from us down the trail. So a few minutes later, after walking in that direction, all of a sudden, we just hear this pounding on the ground, and it actually shook the ground beneath our feet. And we just completely froze. We stood there a little while in shock. Then we started discussing what it was that we just heard, and we just were in utter disbelief. And we had no choice other than to keep going and make our way back to the truck. We get a little further down the path, and that is when it happened. The Sasquatch beat its chest at us. That was the moment I realized we were dealing with a Bigfoot. At first, we thought maybe we were being chased by a big bear. Maybe a moose had run up on us, but we couldn't figure out what it was that was heavy enough to pound the ground so hard that it made the earth shake beneath our feet. But I'll tell you, once I heard this thing beat its chest at us, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that we were dealing with a Sasquatch.
Bigfoot Bytes.
Welcome to Bigfoot Bytes.
I think the main bite that I want you to take out of today's episode is remembering that Bigfoot is something we can compare to more well-known species. We don't have to put Bigfoot in a box in the back storage room of Area 51. We can bring it out to light and we can compare it with other species easily, and it doesn't need to be so mysterious, and we don't need to have so many questions. We can start to come to some conclusions, and we can figure out some answers here. I think we would be remiss in the Bigfoot research community if we continue to categorize Sasquatch as its own unique species that's so completely different from any other animal on the planet. I think it's at a great detriment to finding answers for us to continue doing that. The more you individualize Sasquatch as a species and the more you set them apart from every other animal on the planet, the more questions you come up with than answers. But if you bring it closer to home and you start saying, hey, maybe we can compare some of these behaviors. Maybe we can compare some of these vocalizations. Maybe we can compare some of the aggressive territorial displays they do. And then when we start to do that and we start to compare them to more well-recognized animals, then it starts to simplify everything. It starts to make everything seem a little bit more logical. It's actually less logical to say that they are interdimensional, they can cloak, they can go invisible, than it is to say, oh, they're just a lot like an octopus or a butterfly. And you're going, whoa, how can you compare a Sasquatch to an octopus? How can you compare a Bigfoot to a butterfly? Well, octopus and butterflies both have an incredible ability to completely blend in with their environment and be just absolutely invisible. An octopus can literally change every part of its skin to be completely different colors, even mimic textures, right? They can completely disappear. Do we go around calling octopus interdimensional? Do we go around calling octopus magical, invisible beings? No, we just recognize that they adapt to their surroundings. A butterfly that looks like a leaf on a tree. I'm sure that the first photographer or videographer that was filming wildlife that witnessed that was probably startled. Whoa, that leaf just flew off, right? But logically, they're going, oh, wow, that's a butterfly that looks like a leaf. They're not saying that leaf came from outer space. That's an alien butterfly. That is a butterfly that just came from another dimension in time and space, right? I love thinking about these concepts because it just really grounds us and creates a foundation with roots planted that Bigfoot is a species that we can easily compare to other more well-documented and well-known animals. After living in Florida for some time and watching the gators and how they hunt and how they're stealthy, quiet, they really blend in with their surroundings. They just look like a log floating in the water, and then boom, they attack their prey, right? It got me thinking a lot about Sasquatch and their hunting tactics and what they do in order to catch their prey. Because they're so massive in size, that puts them at a slight disadvantage when it comes to hunting, because they can't exactly run after and chase after their prey. They would scare away an entire herd of elk if they did so. So, just like the alligator, they rely on remaining still and unseen and make very slow, steady movements in order to capture their prey, which a lot of times, if they just wait, their prey will often come right to them, and it makes it very simple for them just to reach out and grab them. There are some people that would argue that Sasquatch don't need to hunt because they are herbivores, or, they have a plant-based diet like their cousins, the silverback gorillas. But I disagree. I think just based on the sheer size difference, Sasquatch are much larger. They have massive muscular tone and muscular structure. And also we have a lot of reports of them stinking of rotting flesh. A lot of people who have had close encounters say that they smell like garbage. And we see that with bears. If an animal has taken down a big game and they've been chewing on raw dead flesh for hours, they're definitely going to put off that odor. But I really do think that the strongest argument that proves that Sasquatch are hunters, and expert ones at that, is the fact that they use camouflage and the ability to remain completely unseen in any given situation and be in utter stealth mode, because it's not like they're interacting with humans so regularly that they would need to be that evasive just because of the humans alone, in the fact that they're observing human behavior and they see that humans are a threat, so they've adapted to be highly evasive from humans. I don't think that's just the case here, because there's not enough human-Sasquatch interaction that's happening regularly in everyday life. It's so rare that I think it's the other end of the spectrum. I think the reason that they are so evasive and use camouflage so well and just blend right into the forest is because it makes it so much easier for them to hunt. If they're just traipsing around the forest, making tons of noise, they're going to scare off anything within a 2-mile radius because of how, just their size and enormity and the pounding of the ground at which they run and just make a ruckus. So there are so many factors to put into this, but I definitely think we have stronger points here towards them being hunters rather than just being gatherers. So in the beginning of the episode, I briefly discussed how they were whistling back and forth to each other. And I do believe that they were trying to mimic a bird or maybe even mimic a person whistling. And I think they were using it as a way to just communicate back and forth in that moment. So let's discuss the use of mimicry as a hunting tactic. Now, why would a Sasquatch need to sound like a bird? Why would Sasquatch be out there whistling? Well, the answer is pretty simple. If two Sasquatch or more are working together to herd a group of elk or deer in the right direction, and they're rounding them up in the right direction, or they're trying to attack from the correct sides, and they're trying to assess where the elk are headed, where the deer are headed, or maybe even a group of wild hogs, whatever it is that they're tracking down and hunting, they're inevitably going to need to communicate. Now, they don't want to disclose their location. They want to be discreet. They also don't want to scare off their prey. So they're going to need to come up with something that's non-aggressive, very simple, easy way to communicate while they're hunting. What better tactic than whistles? They're small, they're simple, they're non-intimidating. They could be mistaken as a bird. Now, I myself have witnessed Sasquatch whistling, and because I'm a human being, I was able to discern, hey, that's not a bird. That sounds more like a human whistle. But I don't think that smaller prey and game are going to be able to assess that. I don't think they're going to be able to realize that it's not a bird, right? So I'm fairly certain that this is a great communication tool that they use while hunting, and I think it should be noted as a pattern that we see in a lot of these accounts. People are describing that they hear whoops and growls and screams, but those are in different situations. Sometimes we hear about wood knocks, sometimes we hear about whistles. Those are things that I think are obviously less aggressive, and we can deduce that are potentially being used for hunting. There's a big difference between aggressive territorial displays that have to do with fighting or intimidating, and then there's the more stealth mode, quiet means of communication that would insinuate hunting, right? Because when you're hunting, you have to be quiet. Anybody who hunts knows this. It's like the number one rule. Another piece of the puzzle that I want to pull in here are wood knocks. There's a couple things I want to look at here. First of all, a big question is, why are they doing this? Why are they doing these wood knocks? And I think that there's a pretty simple answer here. If they're too far away from each other to use the whistling tactic that they, use when they're hunting to communicate, then wood knocks would be the next best thing because that sound travels farther. But I've run into trouble when trying to recreate these wood knocks, and let me know if you guys have experienced this as well. But every time with every stick, no matter how thick the stick is, no matter what size the tree, I can't seem to quite recreate these sounds of these wood knocks efficiently. It just seems like the stick always breaks. There's always some sort of problem, which leads me to believe that they're not actually using sticks. I believe they're doing tongue clucking. That's basically when they're using their tongue and the roof of their mouth to make this super loud knocking sound, but it's more easily recreatable. When you're coming up with a form of communication with one another, you need something that you can recreate and make the same sound every time. Otherwise, it could be confused with meaning something else. If they're taking random sticks and just banging them against the wood, it's going to sound different almost every time. It's very difficult to recreate over and over and over. Now, with the tongue clucking, not only is it a better form of communication over a longer distance versus the whistling, but it's, again, something you can recreate with almost exact efficiency each time. And of course, these are just theories because I've yet to have visual confirmation of this. But I do feel that it makes a lot of sense for them to be recreating the same sound with efficiency versus grabbing sticks that all sound different depending on each size and how hard they slam them. And again, the mystery of how this massive beast can slam these sticks against trees and not break them. That is one thing I'm very curious about, if they are using sticks. All right, let's talk about my encounter where we had a Sasquatch pounding the ground so hard that the earth shook, and we had a Sasquatch beat its chest at us. The first thing I'd like to explain that really sets this experience apart from it being any other animal out there in the wild that we would normally encounter was the fact that when it was pounding the ground, there was no crashing of branches, no breaking of twigs and sticks. Like, for instance, if a bear was running at you full speed enough to pound the ground with its paws, it would be breaking branches. It would be crashing through the forest. But this seemed to be something that was very stable and making a very repetitive pounding against the ground, perhaps in a small section where there wasn't anything on the ground to be breaking and crunching. I've grown up in the mountains my entire life, 30 plus years out in the woods, and I've never known a large animal to stomp the ground like that. Now, we do have deer and elk that do some stomping, but they're going to do that where you're either going to see it or it's not going to be as loud. It's not going to be as intense. Now, we didn't get a visual on anything, but we just felt the ground shaking. It wasn't heavy machinery. There was no construction going on in the area. Again, we were out in the middle of the wilderness. And whatever it was seemed like it was only about 30 feet away. Now, at that initial point, we were uncertain. We were just like, whoa, what was that? So when I described how we kept walking and discussing what it was we experienced, again, we had no choice. We had to get back to the truck. We had no other option. And so we just were like, whoa, what could that have been? Was it falling rocks coming down off the cliffside? Katie had thought maybe it was a helicopter in the area that was landing or something, because it was just so intense that it kind of like went through us. I mean, it shook the ground. We were like, was that an earthquake? We thought, no, that wasn't an earthquake. It was localized. It was in a repeated pattern. We were just really trying to make sense of what happened because we're both highly logical people. I personally have had close encounters with massive bears, moose, elk, deer. I've dealt with a lot of wildlife. I could go on and on about all the wildlife and even sounds that I've heard that later on I looked up online and was like, oh, okay, I heard a bobcat, Getting confirmation like that is really great. So when Katie and I were discussing what it was we just heard, we were trying to figure it out. We were trying to get confirmation. Oh, it must have been this. Oh, it must have been that. But everything that we came up with just didn't make sense. It just didn't fit the profile. And I'll never forget this next moment. Katie was looking at me, trying to describe how it felt to her, because we both agreed that we felt it in the ground, and it was just so intense that it kind of went through us. And so Katie was using her hands and she was kind of waving her hands in the air like a helicopter. And she's like, yeah, I kind of felt like it went wah, wah, wah. And that was the way she was describing it. And then me, I instinctually just wanted to explain how it was so intense I felt it in my chest. So without even thinking, I just kind of went, yeah, I felt it in my chest like this. And I beat my chest. And instantly, the moment I beat my chest, the Bigfoot beat its chest back at us. There was absolutely no mistaking what was going on because we didn't hear any branches breaking, no rustling of the bushes. We just heard fist on flesh, and it sounded large. So without even thinking about it, I had just accidentally invited this display of dominance. And that's a big reason why I wanted the theme of today's episode to be about comparison. I feel that I can definitely compare this to an experience that someone might have if they're hiking in the Congo and they run into a silverback. There are a lot of people online that get these ideas of grandeur that they're just going to chase after the Bigfoot and get in its face and get the best footage anybody's ever seen, or why are the videos always so blurry, and why can't anybody get closer? Well, if you were in the Congo and you came up on a silverback gorilla, would you get in the gorilla's face? Would you get right up next to the gorilla? Or would you think to yourself, gee, maybe I better keep my distance because I could get attacked? So the point I'm really trying to drive home here is you have to stay level-headed. It's exciting, it's terrifying at the same time. You're thinking, is this some crazy, otherworldly, other dimensional experience I'm having? Or should I treat this like there's something really massive 20 feet away from me that could rip me to shreds, and I need to take this seriously and I need to handle things accordingly? Now, of course, the Bigfoot community could always use more help with boots on the ground researchers out in the field, but always keep yourself safe. That's absolutely one of my biggest goals here with this podcast. Not only to educate people on Sasquatch behavior and vocalization patterns, but also how to keep people safe from Sasquatch territory. They will aggressively defend their area, and it's important to be safe and alert at all times. I used to hike alone often. I lived in Lake Tahoe for 10 years, and I used to think I was the apex predator in the forest. But now I know better, and I will never hike alone again. With each Bigfoot bite we take together, I want us to start recognizing patterns of behavior. Once we start to do this, the research will become less mysterious and more analytical. Stay tuned for more Bigfoot behavior analysis, undercover interviews, personal stories, and more logical theories with yours truly. See you next time on Bigfoot Bytes.
3 seconds later, after you did that, we hear this, like, the same rhythmic beat of the thudding, but, like, it sounded like someone was beating their chest.
Bigfoot.